We're standing on the site of a church which has been here for, we believe, just over 1,000 years. Can't prove it exactly, but we know definitely the priests have been known by name since 1287. The history of the church is a church dedicated to a saint, St Edmund, King and Martyr. St Edmund was an East Anglian saint. He was also king of the Angles over that side of the country. I'll get to a little more of that when we get down to the statue of St Edmund. But this church, we believe, is either the 4th or the 5th on this site. We can't be exact because not many records were kept without great research, and we've done a lot of research. And Hilary Atkins, one of our congregation, was the archivist of Dudley at one time, and she's still researching into that. We do know that several events happened throughout the history of the church, and this church was rebuilt in 1724. We do know that the history of the church has varied over many, many years, according to who wrote the history. And there were great connections with the town. At one point, the town was top church and bottom church and in between. Very few little houses. The town has changed dramatically. I mean, in my lifetime and your lifetime, the town has changed dramatically. But before that, of course, there were little houses back to backs everywhere around all the towns, all the town centres. St Edmund's has been here for 1,000 years. How we're talking about the present building today is the fact that in 1646, during the Civil War, the commander of the castle, who was Colonel Leveson, heard that the parliamentarians, the Roundheads, were marching up from Worcester to attack the town. So he decided that there'd be no shelter offered for the opposing army, the Cromwell's men. So he decreed that all the houses and anywhere offering shelter should be demolished. Well, in 4 days they demolished all the little houses over there. Bearing in mind the town was nothing like it is now. They demolished all the little houses, and allegedly, and in that book that you've just bought, that wonderful book, it does say, available £5 over there. It does say that St Edmund's was demolished. Well, I have been of the opinion for many, many years, and one of the few people who said no, it wasn't demolished, it was slighted. Because in 4 days there were 300 men in the castle. They couldn't have demolished a building of this size, and it was larger then than it is now. They couldn't have demolished a building of this size, and they would not have wasted their gunpowder on blowing it up because they're frightened of the Roundheads attacking them. So we believe it was demolished, or partly demolished, or slighted. We think that the roof may have been taken off, and we think possibly the side down there. But during the investigations for our tower restoration, we found in the tower itself, above the roof level as it is now, the form of the old roof level. Now, if they demolished it, that wouldn't have been there. And also in 1485, Richard III, you know, he who was under the car park, Richard III heard that there was a great fire in Dudley. The Great Fire of Dudley. London had a great fire, 1666. No one knows about our great fire, 1485. It wasn't as great as London, but some of the church was burnt. So in 1485, Richard sent 60 oaks to Dudley to repair the chancel and the church of St Edmund. We've had some dendrochronology done to determine how old some of the beams are upstairs. Great expense. Remember time? Anyone remember Time Team? Yeah, years ago. That's where I know that word from. We're all clever, aren't we? Let me say that it cost £750 to have 6 oaks done. So there we are. So you can see why we're selling raffle tickets today. So we're waiting for the dendrochronology results to come back to determine how old some of the beams are, and if those beams were original beams from there and in there still. I mean, some of the beams above here are that thick. We don't know when they were put in, but we'll find out. But some of the beams in the tower are that thick. We think those are probably some of the original ones taken up there. So that was 1485, after the Great Fire of Dudley. You go back and tell everybody there's a Great Fire in Dudley. You tell the kids that, they'll say 1666, Great Fire of London. So that's bringing it down into what is happening at St Edmund's in the year 1724. I can't show you pictures of churches before, but we can talk about the church as it is now. In the tower itself, and our stonemason out there will tell you, some of the brickwork, stonework up there is 1 metre thick, and all chipped out by hand like he's doing out there. And some of it is 1 metre thick. And we think that the bricks were added to the tower afterwards, sort of encasing the original stonework, which is a sensible idea. And that is very interesting because, you know, I shall never hold my head up high if it's proven that the church was demolished and not slighted. So if we can now sort of move forward into the church. We do apologise that there's no toilet, so it won't be too long. We're having new ones put in. If we move into here, a little further down, I can start explaining exactly about what is happening. You'll see various pictures that go around. But in 1815, 1818, top church, which is St Thomas at the top of the hill, bottom church, bottom of the hill, top church, top of the hill, St Thomas's. That was falling down, so they demolished it totally. Now, in those days, every area had got little back-to-backs, thousands of them everywhere. And so they decided that the people of Top Church Parish should go to church. In those days, what did you do? In 1815, you probably sort of got up in the morning, you were lucky to have breakfast, you might have had a pint, and the men probably did the same as well, and nothing else to do. So they had to go to church. Because there's so many people who wanted to go to church, they decided to put these balconies in 1815, 1818, to accommodate the overflow of people. When you get round there, you'll see some of the processions from Dudley. You know, there'll be 150 people in the procession from the church. That was typical of the churches then. So they knocked Top Church down, put these balconies in 1815, 1818. Now, before we go any further, let me tell you, personally, I hate them. If I'd got a big hammer, I'd knock them out tomorrow. Oh. Look at the shaping of the archways. How wonderful it is. Yeah. Right? What you can't see unless you go around the other side are the shaping of the windows, following the same design. And there were clear windows in here until those pictures were put in the 19th century, the stained glass window. There were clear windows. How light and bright when the sun comes through, particularly that side on a Sunday morning. It's wonderful. So how light and bright it would be without those balconies. Don't tell the Victorian Society about what I've said. They won't thank you for it. So that's what happened in the part of the history there. The church, the ceiling was lowered, by the way, to bring it down. That was in the 1860s. There was an awful lot of work done in the 19th century by the Victorians, because they loved putting memorials on the wall. Everyone who died was the most wonderful person who ever lived. And because you were a rich Victorian, you had a big plaque on the wall, didn't you? Every church has them. So that's what happened here. This church has been through many changes. These pews were private pews at one time. You paid your rent. You know, number 64, that's about my age. Number 64 was my pew. It wasn't really, I wasn't around that time. So that was your pew.